Welcome to Massive Passive Cash Flow, the podcast that guides professionals to financial prosperity. Join our community and let's start building your wealth. Here's your host, Gary Wilson.
Welcome back to the Massive Passive Cash Flow podcast. I'm Gary Wilson, your host, and I'm glad to have you back. Hey, if you wouldn't mind, if you haven't already done so, is please subscribe to the podcast. It's on 30 different channels, all of your favorites, including the biggie, which is Apple. And while you're out there, make sure you stop by globalinvestoragent.com. Okay. This is where you and I, the investors, will find agents who are trained to work with us. These are not your typical agents. They have to be certified, and they know how to identify, analyze, and negotiate on and off market deals, and not just flipping and duplexes. I mean, we get into some pretty interesting projects, guys. So this is the place to go. And if you are a real estate agent, and you're looking for what to do, I know the business is slowing down. Believe me, we've got a team of agents in 36 states. This is the way to go. You have to have investors in your database. You have to know how to work with them, terminology, methodology. So go to that website, click on Learn More, and find out more about it. Do yourself a favor. So in the meantime, we got a great guest today. Chris Larsen is on. We've had Chris on before from beautiful Asheville, North Carolina. So first off, Chris, man, good to see you, dude. It's been about 2 years, and I can't wait to see what you got going on, man. Hey, thanks for doing this,
Oh, it's great to see you again, Gary. You look great. And I will tell you that I've had coaching clients that have used your agents around the country. So if you're interested in working with somebody, I can personally vouch that it's a great network that you guys have built.
Oh, thank you. I appreciate that. What's interesting is when we last spoke, obviously we're in the heart of the pandemic, but it was like opportunity time. It's so weird because entrepreneurs, when adversity hits, we really don't go into panic mode. We go into preparation. We find a way. And I know you've done that too. So if you don't mind, kind of fill us in to kind of paint a picture for people who maybe didn't see the first podcast and give a little background. We can start there and then go into some examples of what you're doing now,
Yeah, no, thank you, Gary. And I'm going to talk about kind of the real estate cycles too, because I bought my first piece of real estate at 21 when I was in college. My parents were in the real estate business. They actually worked for Jimmy Dean Construction in the early 90s, and were doing residential developments when the market was really strong, really hot. But they both lost their jobs during the savings and loan crisis. So I saw that. I saw kind of these slowdowns that occurred, obviously 2008, 2009, and we were coming out of the pandemic when I was last on the show. We had that in between that and where we are today, the best year we've ever seen, especially when it comes to multifamily real estate, which is what I really talk about in my book. So if you'd like a copy, go to nextlevelincome.com. If you click on the book link, put your address in, I'll send you a copy. And a lot of people have been asking me, Gary, they're like, well, what do we do now? Like, it seems like the market has slowed down, but it's kind of like we're in this little bit of a hangover. 2021, 2020, 2021, even early 2022, most markets across the country, we're seeing double-digit rent growth. And, for those of us that have been in the market for a long time, whether you're talking about single-family rentals or multifamily rentals, you can't raise rents 20% a year indefinitely. Like, that's not sustainable. So what we're seeing is rents come back to normal, some markets we're seeing low single digit growth, anywhere from 1% in the markets that we're in up to actually still close to 10% growth in markets like Nashville. And they're back to healthy numbers in my opinion. But we've really seen deal flow slow down on the multifamily side as people kind of settle back into this new normal. I think that this is very typical of what we see in the real estate cycle. I'm an avid student of real estate history. One of my favorite books is called The Secret Life of Real Estate and Banking by Phil Anderson. And it's like actually, let me show it to you.
Okay.
This thing is like a Bible to me. It sits in my desk drawer, and it's also about as thick as a Bible. You can see all my dog-eared pages. But what Phil does, he goes back and he actually has several sources of evidence or of information and data that he puts in here, but he just traces history. And what he shows is real estate goes in 18 or 19 year cycles. And, there's typically a mid-cycle slowdown. We saw that during kind of like early 2000s after 9/11. We saw it, during the pandemic. And then the market comes back typically stronger than it was before that. And then people start to get nervous. And as the cycle slows down, you have to be conscious of where we are, and you have to sometimes shift and change your focus. Now, I'm a value add guy, as I wrote about in my book. And we take our value add framework and we look at other things out there. So even though, it may seem like deal flow has slowed down or even dried up in some areas, I still think that there's a lot of opportunity out there if you're looking in the right places.
Yeah. Well, I appreciate that. So I want to touch on let's touch on the multifamily just for a second. You mentioned obviously the rents have gone up. It was crazy in the pandemic. Everybody just thought we're going to take us in a recession, and yet the market took off. I mean, the values went up, the rents went up. But are you still doing that, or have you transitioned into something else? Or kind of tell me where do you see things going with this, and what are you getting into now?
Yeah. So Gary, I've been investing in residential real estate, as I mentioned, for over 2 decades, in multifamily for over a decade. And what we still have the bulk of our portfolio in apartments and multifamily real estate up and down the Southeast, including Texas, over 3,000 units. So we're very happy with the portfolio that we have. Again, the deals, they're fewer and further between, but there's still some great areas. Build to rent is a great area right now. And one of the reasons, and I just did a podcast on this, which again, you can find on our website, nextlevelincome.com, but we talked about the 5 macro trends that are supporting the market. And the reason that residential real estate, multifamily real estate, build to rent real estate that kind of falls in somewhere in between those, in my opinion, is still going to be strong for the next decade, is because we have over a 4 million unit deficit in this country. Wow. So we have to build, 250 to 350 units per year just to keep up with this. And the thing is, this is not countrywide. California, Texas, Florida make up the bulk of that, about 1.5 million units. The rest are spread out through the Sun Belt, through the Southeast. So, one thing I've heard here recently is, "Oh, Chris, we're going to be oversupplied in 2023." And what happened is, now that's partially true because you had cheap money, you had massive demand, you had massive rent growth, and we had all these housing starts to try to catch up with this shortage that we've been facing for now over a decade and still going to face for the next decade. But what's happening now? Money's more expensive. Rent growth has slowed down back to normal, healthy levels, as we talked about, and starts have plummeted. Housing starts have plummeted, which means after this year, we're going to go back into this shortage that we need to make up. So I think if you are looking in the right markets, you can still find good, strong deals. You just have to be conscious of the type of debt that you put on there. We also have over a dozen self-storage facilities, mobile home parks. There's a massive affordable housing shortage in this country too. And if you're not supplying a lot of new units, you don't have that trickle down effect. So what happens is you have not only a shortage of new units, but you have a shortage of affordable units. Excuse me.
Yep.
Pardon me. So, I think if you're conscious of being in, my apologies, must be the pollen.
That's okay. Yep. That time of year, I get it too.
All right. So, so I think if you're in good, strong markets like the Southeast, like Texas, like Florida, Phoenix, Arizona is another strong market. Even local markets, if you have specific knowledge, you can still find good deals that are out there as well.
Okay. Now, one thing that you mentioned, obviously the housing shortage, it's not every market is the same. There's some similarity between different markets. Obviously, there's macroeconomics and microeconomics. But one thing you mentioned about the affordable housing is it seems like that's more consistent across the country, unless you're in an area that's losing population, in a big way. Yeah. But I don't know what the answer is to that. I mean, I know if you think about it, we're investors and we work with builders and developers, and every builder or developer wants to build $1 million homes because that's the big bucks. They don't want to build, low income housing and things like that. So there's got to be an answer. And I know some states are coming out with tax incentives to encourage people to either convert units, remodel them, refurbish them to affordable housing, or do new development. But I don't see the federal government doing anything. Are you any insight on that? What are your thoughts on that as far as helping spearhead that solution?
Yeah, this is a real passion of mine. We've looked for over a decade here locally in Asheville, which struggles for affordable housing, to find solutions. And part of the problem is you really can't build affordable housing. You can subsidize it, you can encourage it, but to build a new unit, it's around $300,000 to build one unit. One of the things, we're finishing up a project right now in Houston, Texas. It's a 3-property portfolio. It's almost 700 units, 666 units. And what we're doing in conjunction with the Houston Housing Authority. Now, what Houston has done, I think, is very progressive, very innovative. It's developed a true public-private partnership. Okay. And what they do is, if you allocate 50% of your units to either 80% of area median income or 60% of area median income residents, and there's slightly different levels for each of those, as you can imagine, then what Houston will do is they will waive your tax bill for up to 99 years.
Whoa.
Now, when you look at our average property in the Houston market, our operating expenses are typically about 50% for these types of properties. The tax bill typically comprises 15% of the 50%, so 30% of the operating expenses. Yes, you're talking about a massive shift in net operating income. And what this does, this allows us to come in. We're acquiring these units for, say, around $175,000. It varies from property to property, as you can imagine. But say $175,000, the city of Houston immediately gets affordable housing. We cannot discriminate between the units that we improve and the units that we don't improve. So we make improvements in all the units. So whether you're paying a reduced amount of rent or you're paying market rent, you're going to get the same type of unit. We get a property that goes from, say, a mid-4 cap to a mid-6 cap property, which has been really challenging to find anything north of a 6 cap in the multifamily space for the last 5+ years. So we get a really good deal for our investors. We give the city of Houston hundreds and hundreds of now affordable units that they can supply. The city of Houston, since they have affordable housing, makes it easier for them to attract employees, which means that it helps propel business growth. And if business growth and the economy is strong, that's good for us. It brings in more people, and it's a real virtuous cycle that continues. So that's an example of a program that we've been working with the city of Houston on. I think a lot of cities around the country could look at that and say, hey, this is a real public-private partnership. It benefits the city. It benefits the investors or the owners of this. It also benefits the residents tremendously. They get to pay, a more affordable amount of rent, and they get a unit that is in better quality or better area, better quality than they would if they had to move to, a lesser quality unit, maybe an unsafe neighborhood. Yeah.
We'll be right back with the Massive Passive Cash Flow podcast after I invite you to Monday Night Live. Every Monday night, 7 p.m. Eastern, I teach a class without fail for you on subjects ranging from flipping to buying rentals, managing rentals, wholesaling, commercial, creative purchasing techniques, analyzing properties, identifying properties, hundreds and hundreds and hundreds of subjects. And if you are a licensee, if you have a real estate license, you should definitely tap in, because there are a lot of investor agents also in the class. Many of them are on the global investor agent team. So you can learn from them, as well as from me, how to actually work with investors correctly and profitably. All right, we'll see you Monday night. The link is in the show notes. Go ahead and register. We'll get right to the Massive Passive Cash Flow podcast.
Yeah. Well, I love that concept. I love what you're doing there. And then I would, I think that's something else I'd like to personally participate in, so what else? I know we were speaking about car washes before, and that was a big thing for Florida, and it probably still is. It's like they were popping up everywhere.
Yeah.
And it's like, has it been systematized yet? I mean, with the people developing it, and it kind of feel, what's it like? Because I'm imagining beginning of years it was probably more hands-on, and now it seems like the development can be easier because there's companies that just that's what they do, and then The machinery's water. I mean, I'm just kind of throwing this out there, but are you involved in that? And kind of catch me up there if you don't mind,
Yeah, we were talking a little bit before the show here, Gary. So if you're an investor today, I think there's a real opportunity in what I would call operational real estate. So you and I were talking about short-term or mid-term rentals.
Yes.
So this is a great space where you have, a business, in short-term rentals or mid-term rentals. It's a little bit more complicated than if you're just buying a property and renting it out long-term. Yes, it's more complicated, but again, like we said, Gary, when there's more problems, when there's more issues that you can solve, there's more opportunity. So if you're a newer investor, I think short-term and mid-term rentals are a great space to investigate. Assisted living, I think, would fall into this, or senior housing would fall into this. Again, you're managing a staff that is helping out these residents. And then, I could go on and on with different things, but car washes are another thing. So this is a piece of real estate that you buy, but really it's a business. Okay. So, investors, they look at the returns and they're like, oh, why would I just not invest all my money in car washes? And the answer is, you have to be cognizant that, even though we have apartments, we have self-storage units, mobile home parks, different things, the car washes really are more of a business than any of those. So we looked into this space, Gary. Actually, my uncle and I looked into buying a car wash about 8 years ago. I actually own a car wash here locally in Asheville, North Carolina, in addition to the portfolio that I run with my partners. And, what I like about the business is it's a high margin business and it's relatively simple. Now, if you read my book, you know that I have 18 years in the medical device space, and that's a really complicated business. You're talking about very sophisticated technology that goes into a patient that's implanted by a brain surgeon, a spine surgeon. It's made out of, in a lot of cases, space age metals. It has to be sterilized. You have to have the right size for the patient at the right time for the right surgery. And, you have to implant it in the perfect sequence with the right instruments. So it's a very logistics heavy, technology heavy industry. You have payers that range from insurance companies to hospitals to individuals, private payers, Medicare, Medicaid. It's pretty complicated. A car wash, somebody shows up, they pay, 10 or 20 bucks for a car wash, they get their car washed and they drive off. Right. And if the wash works well, then that customer's going to be pretty happy. So I like simple businesses with high margins. Now, one area that we identified in the car wash space is that it's inefficient in a lot of ways. And this comes from the lack of institutional owners. So if you look at the apartments that I talk about in my book, 85% of these large apartment complexes are owned by institutions. So we're talking about REITs, BlackRock, large private players like us that own, over $1 billion of real estate. They're running a pretty tight ship. Okay. So there's some inefficiencies, but it's pretty tight business. Guess what? It's the opposite in the car wash space. Okay. So in the car wash space, only 15% of owners own more than 4 locations. So 85%, about the same number that are institutional in apartments, are mom and pops in the car wash space. Okay. So they're doing things like maybe they have their brother-in-law that's managing the property or the business. They're not operating, really good books. Maybe they don't have national chemical contracts. Maybe they don't have the latest equipment. Maybe they're not paying their staff the highest rates in the market because they say, hey, if I save $1, I make an extra $1. Well, we take the opposite approach. We say, if we can come in as a private owner, as private equity group, and operate like the bigger institutions in the space, we can buy from these mom and pops, these smaller operators. We can aggregate these into our national brand. We can take advantage of our national contracts and drive pricing or drive costs lower. We can improve customer relations or the satisfaction that our customers face. And then we can implement things like our app, like our CRM. You can actually check out our brand at expresswash.com. We have about 24 locations currently. We just closed on 3 more. We have 7 more under contract. It's expresswash.com. And what we are striving to do, and anybody in the Southeast, you may chuckle when I say this, but we want to be essentially the Chick-fil-A of the car wash business. Okay. And here's what I mean. I got 2 boys, 11 and 13. They love Chick-fil-A. They love
Mhm.
Chick-fil-A. There's actually some leftover Chick-fil-A in my refrigerator right now from this weekend. I kid you not. So now, does Chick-fil-A have the best sandwich in the world? No.
Probably not. Yeah.
They have a really good chicken sandwich. But my restaurant, actually, I'm going to go here for lunch after our interview here today, Gary. They have, in my opinion, the best chicken sandwich in Asheville. But guess what? It's $15, and I got to sit down. I got to pay $15. I have to pay a tip. I got to wait to get the chicken sandwich. It's a big experience. Whereas if I go to Chick-fil-A, in the time it takes me to get to this restaurant, I can go to Chick-fil-A and be home, and it might cost me, $15 for a whole meal. Maybe even for me and my son, one of my boys.
Mhm.
And the reason people like Chick-fil-A is it provides a great value, it's consistent, and it gives you a really great experience. And if you look at the car wash space, if you look at the top 3 reasons why people get their car washed, quality is number 4. It's not even in the top 3.
Yeah.
Customers want the same thing they want from Chick-fil-A. They want a great value.
Mhm.
They want a predictable experience. They want to show up at the wash. They want it to work. They want to get in and out in 3, 4, 5 minutes, and they want to feel good when they get out the other side. So we're doing that with our brand. And then here's what's really exciting. Not only can we take what we've been learning and apply this to our new locations,
Mhm.
but if we can increase sales, if we can increase memberships, that increases our revenue, our national contracts drop our operating expenses, which means it increases our net operating income or our EBITDA, which increases the value of the business. But we're buying at a 7 or 8x multiple of EBITDA. And when you roll up 50, 100, 200 of these car wash locations, you can sell at a 12 to 20x multiple of EBITDA, which means it really supercharges the returns you get on the back end of a portfolio sale.
Yeah. Oh, I love it. I started noticing this several years ago. I made Florida my primary residence in January 2016.
Smart man.
Yeah. And I noticed just in the last couple of years, really actually during the pandemic years, I mean, so many people were moving there because they were, quite frankly, escaping the oppressive Northeast and Midwest. I mean, the weather and the
taxes,
taxes, all the regulations. I mean, it's just, I mean, we have to have regulation in a civilized country, but
absolutely,
some states take it too far. I learned this when I was in banking, because we dealt with this political thing.
Yeah.
But, regulation leads to legislation, and legislation leads to taxation. So whenever you see the government moving in to try to regulate an industry, particularly new ones, it's the legislation's coming, and so is the taxation.
Taxation, interesting.
And you look at people leaving California in droves. I mean, money's leaving.
Well, I just saw this morning they passed the first legislation in the country, if not the world, limiting diesel engines. So in 2035, you're not going to be able to operate a diesel engine in California. Now, is that good or bad? I'm an environmentalist. I think these things are good, but it certainly, I think, as you mentioned, that ultimately turns into costs that trickle down to the consumer and those sorts of things. So
I'm an outdoors person. I'm all for it. But the thing is when you're in business, you want to do business in business friendly environments.
Yeah.
And the states you mentioned earlier where we're investing in, those are the business friendly environments. And
absolutely.
But I should say that I actually love the state of California. I have family out there.
It's gorgeous. Yeah.
It's amazing. You can surf in the morning, swim in your pool in the afternoon, and ski at night.
It's got some of the most beautiful places in this country, and some of the best minds. Right, we have tons of entrepreneurs out there. It's absolutely amazing, and I think it's amazing despite some of the regulations that we have. But again, I'm kind of taking it full circle here. That's one of the great things. Most people don't wash their cars at home anymore. It's kind of like washing your dishes. In the sink. It's actually more environmentally friendly to wash at one of our locations than it is in your driveway, because we collect all the soap and chemicals. We recycle water in certain cases, and it's more efficient. It's more environmentally friendly than if you
Right.
do it in your home. So I've had that question from, friends, investors that are like, well, hey, are the environmentalists going to shut you guys down? And the answer is they shouldn't, because it's actually, we're doing the environment a service when it comes to a lot of this stuff.
Yeah. Well, definitely another thing you can notice, guys, for everybody listening, whenever you go through car wash today, go through a newer one, a contemporary one, and then go by one of the old ones you went by maybe 15, 20 years ago. You will notice a huge difference in the machine
Totally different
automation. I mean, they're so much more efficient. And
it's incredible.
yeah. So now,
So real quick for the audience, Gary, a quick primer. Maybe I should have mentioned this initially. The one we own here in Asheville is called the in-bay automatic. So it's kind of like a robotic wash. Okay. You pull in, there's a big robot arm that goes around your car. Ours is actually touchless. We have 2 bays. I love it. I take my car through there a couple times a week. Doesn't touch the car. So whether you have a Porsche or you have a Toyota or Hondas like we do, anything in between, it's going to wash it really nicely. You have a self-service. So self-service, automatic in-bays, like I just mentioned, are 2 types. And then the one that we focus on are called express tunnels. So if you're listening, chances are you've been through one. It's when you pull in, you basically pull into a conveyor belt and it pulls you through the tunnel. And there's different stations inside that tunnel that prep your car. They spray your car down, they wash your car, they scrub your car, then they put on the after coating or ceramic coating, and then they dry your car as well. So that's what's called an express tunnel. One thing is, if you're saying, hey, I want to get into this, personally, I'm an entrepreneur, an in-bay automatic is going to be a lot cheaper, or self-service is going to be a lot cheaper to buy. You can buy for sometimes $500,000, maybe up to $2 million. But these tunnels are going to cost $3, $5, sometimes $10 million with the land to build. So again, it's a fairly specialized space. There's very few groups out there that are doing what we're doing. And we believe that the next 5 years are going to be the biggest area of opportunity, because we're going to see this area be built out in about 15 years. So if we can put together a portfolio, exit it in the next 5 years to a private equity group, they're going to get a really nice return, really nice cash flow for their investors. And our investors are going to do even better.
Yeah. Well, I love it. I mean, it's essentially, in today's terms, we've taken an industry that was historically, I mean, you saw the old cinder block, buildings, very bland, and the car washes really weren't all that great. Like you said, it's like the 4th thing people are concerned about. But and there used to be, there was a lot of manual labor involved. I mean, machinery.
Indeed,
and now it's like so much easier, and and the technology, like you said, it's more efficient on resource usage. It's more efficient on cleanup, taking care of the byproduct and so forth. And they're just nicer facilities. And you get a great. I mean, I wish I could think of the name of the one. Whenever I go down to Florida, once I pass Venice, it's the same exit for Venice Beach and area called Inglewood. And don't repeat Inglewood. We don't want, that's a secret. We want to keep. It's the car wash right off the exit, Jacaranda Boulevard or something like that. And right on the left. And it's just, every time I go there, I was like, I look forward to it. It's like Chick-fil-A. Like you said, I'm like, man, I can't wait to get there. Because the car's going to come out spotless. There's people there helping you with the card that's putting your credit card in and stuff like that.
Exactly. Yeah.
And they crank it through, man. Let me tell you, that place is probably making all kinds of money,
and like you said, it's it's something that a lot of people look forward to. You feel good when your car's clean, coming out the other side. And it's not, it's a pretty simple business model, but you have machines. You got to keep your machines working well. You got to make sure the spray angles and all that stuff are great. But if you do it well. You can really do well. And then, if you can roll these up and do a bigger portfolio, there's a lot of value in that. And just, hey, Gary, if you could drive down the road and go to the same wash that you do down there with the same membership, there's a lot of value in that. So we're using that. We're also have a proprietary CRM we're building with custom analytics that allows marketing, but it also allows the ability to partner with other businesses that, let's say a car dealership that may be interested in some of the data with that. And the nice thing is, it's going to work in St. Augustine or Fort Myers, Florida, like 2 of our locations. It's also going to work if you're listening in your hometown. Whereas we might not buy a big apartment complex in an area that has, say, $40,000 area median income. But if you're making $40 or $50 or $60,000, you can afford a $20 or $30 a month membership to one of these car washes. So a much bigger market.
Yeah. Well, listen to this. I know we're kind of getting close on time here, but is it so for all the listeners, I guess they can participate in some of these, like the car wash program you got going on, and the Houston project for multifamily. Are those things that people can get involved in, the listeners on the podcast here also?
Absolutely. So if you're interested, again, go to nextlevelincome.com, get a free copy of our book on there. Also, you can click the invest link if you want to learn more about our investor opportunities in multifamily real estate, self-storage, and car washes. You can click on the invest link and schedule a call with our team. Also, we have a debt fund. And if you're looking for a place for your cash, and a lot of people are nervous right now about keeping large amounts of cash in the bank, we just increased the rate that our debt fund pays to 8%. And that debt fund is secured by properties, usually between 60 and 65% loan to value. So if you're looking for a short-term place for your cash that has a liquidity provision in it, you can also learn about that as well.
Yeah. Well, you're definitely singing my song, man. It's funny because where I am right now is I'm really looking for opportunities like that. And a lot of people that the listeners to the podcast, for what we can tell in surveys and people contacting us, they're in the same boat. They're like 50s and 60s. They're like, hey, Gary, I don't know if I want to directly own properties anymore. I'd rather be part of a project where I'm providing some funding. I'm an equity partner, or like I'm providing debt. You're a lender, so to speak. And sometimes there's a combination of things. That is probably one of the biggest growing sectors of our business right now. And if you think about the demographics, we're at the tail end of the baby boomer group. I mean, we're like right in there. Yeah. And we want to enjoy life more and reap the rewards of all of our efforts over all the years. But I love people, and I've owned hundreds and hundreds of properties and thousands of tenants, but I want to help in a different way. All the stuff you go through when you're a direct owner, I mean, I'm sure you can see all this gray hair. It comes with
at least you have it. You can see my spots here, and it's the same issues. But no, Gary, you bring up a great point. If you're an active investor, a lot of these passive investments can be complementary. And that's I started, as an active investor, and then I started investing passively, before we started syndicating these deals. And they're really, it doesn't have to be either or. It can be very complementary. And, look, our investors are part of our team. We're on a big team together. We find opportunities. We work with our investors, and we see everybody as a big team out there. And I think there's an opportunity to do a lot of good with some of these things that we're working on. And that's why that's why it's fun to be back on the show, share kind of how the environment's changed, and look forward to having you on the podcast's Next Level Income show coming up here again soon.
Well, I'm looking forward to it, Chris. And I just remind everybody, so you want to visit nextlevelincome.com, and there you can get a copy of the book, Next Level Income. You can click on invest to see if you can participate in some things. And Chris, I just want to thank you for all the golden nuggets you dropped here today, and you consistently give. And I mean, that's one of the secrets of success is people want to do business with you because they feel like they know you, like you, and trust you. And the way to develop that is have low or no barriers to entry, and then later on, when people see what you're doing from the inside, it's much easier to attract the right kind of people too. I mean, so I really appreciate what you're doing. And for everybody listening, this is Chris is back on because he does deliver the goods. And if you want to participate like I am, check it out. I mean, I can vouch personally for his character, and there's so many similarities. But in any case, for everybody out there, when you're out there, nextlevelincome.com, before you leave the internet, make sure you leave a review for the podcast. I know I ask this a lot, but it really is the currency that makes podcasts go around. We don't get paid for this. It's a community service, and your vote of confidence in a review means everything to us. So really appreciate it. And one last stop is the globalinvestoragent.com. Particularly, I'm going to speak to all the agents out there right now. Why wait? The market is changing. Don't panic, prepare, click on the learn more button, figure out what it is we're doing with agents around the country. And I'm telling you, we built this to serve the investor community using you, the agent, and training you while we're at it so you can invest too. That's one of the keys to success. Multiple streams of income, one genre, one industry that you're in. It's all related. Everything that Chris and I are doing, we didn't start off like this. We started off working a regular job like everybody else. And look at us now. I mean, yeah, my gosh. So in any case, you guys take care of yourselves. God bless you and your families. And we will see you on the next Massive Passive Cash Flow podcast.
Thanks for listening to this episode of Massive Passive Cash Flow. Be sure to go to realestatewithgarywilson.com to join our community and start building wealth today.